Hey, it's time for us to do a thorough product review on the brand new Safe & Sound Pro mmWave RF meter. I believe it is a complete breakthrough product. This is the first ever portable handheld RF meter suitable for mmWave RF assessment because it has appropriate level of sensitivity for the kind of careful EMF assessments we do for people in their homes. Let's discuss coming up. You are concerned about your family's exposure to harmful man-made electromagnetic radiation, and rightly so. But fear is not productive, and we want to help you replace that with knowledge and a plan so you can rest easy knowing that you've done all you can to reduce your family's exposures. Today, we're going to be talking about an important new product. As I mentioned in the introduction, the Safe & Sound Pro mmWave RF meter is a breakthrough product. It is the first ever portable handheld RF meter suitable for mmWave RF assessment with appropriate level of sensitivity for the kind of careful work that we need to do in EMF home assessments. It has an impressive frequency range of 20 to 40 gigahertz with a sensitivity of 5 and 0.5 microwatts per square meter with the stub and horn antennas respectively. It's easy to use and it has good battery life, and if that is all you're looking for, that is a summary. Class dismissed. If you're interested in learning what all of that means or want a little bit more information, you are in the right place. So first, before we get started, I want to make clear my relationship with Safe Living Technology. I purchased this meter with my own money. I was blessed to be offered the opportunity to be one of their beta testers, and so I purchased this meter. I have also, by the way, purchased 4 other Safe & Sound branded meters. In other words, meters that they designed with my own money, all of them. And I've also purchased many other professional series, the Gigahertz Solutions, high-end meters from Safe & Sound over a number of years. I was a customer of theirs for years before I became an affiliate. What my affiliate relationship means is they've given me a discount code. I can share that with my clients. If they use that code when they check out, they'll receive a lower price for the product. They get a discount. And if I'm lucky, I get a small something from Safe Living Technologies as well. So I just want to make clear the nature of my relationship and let you know that, as I say, I paid for this meter. This is not sponsored in any way. They have no editorial input. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, the first thing I alluded to is the uniqueness of this product, and that is because of the sensitivity. What is sensitivity and why is it important? Well, this meter is capable of showing me whether I have a tiny bit of mmWave RF radiation. That's important to me because the so-called safety limits that are out there from various governments around the world are, in my opinion, woefully inadequate when you're talking about exposure to people and other living things. I find them to be between hundreds and millions of times higher than by the biologic effects that I see in the research. So, for this reason, it's important to me in my work to be able to get down to a very sensitive instrument that can show me if there's even a whisper. I've personally found out, and I've shared that elsewhere in this podcast, that healing from reversing electromagnetic poisoning, it takes getting down to a very tiny level of exposure, what would be read as 0 on most meters. So that's just my personal part in all of this. All right, so the lowest measurable on this new meter is between 0.5 microwatts per square meter. That is with something they call the horn antenna. We'll talk about that more later. And the default antenna that comes with the meter is called the stub antenna. The lowest measurable intensity there is 5 microwatts per square meter. 0.5 or 5, I can live with that. I want to be able to tell my clients if they even have a little tiny bit of millimeter wave radiation, because I'm assuming it must be horrible, worse than a normal RF. Otherwise, they wouldn't be sort of forcing it down our throats, right? But yeah, so I think this is an acceptable range, and it's amazing that they can do that over such a broad frequency response. So let's talk about the frequency response next. So this meter has a frequency response between 20 and 40 gigahertz. Well, what does that mean? Give me some context for understanding that. I would say, look at it this way. All the action so far in everything from the Schumann resonance of the Earth, the frequency of our power grid, AM radio, FM radio, public safety radio, television, weather stations, radar, cell phones, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, all of that, even 5G low and mid bands, all of that action, if you will, all of that pollution is 8 gigahertz and below. The frequency range of this meter spans 20 gigahertz, okay? 20 gigahertz, between 20 and 40 gigahertz. So we can measure anything from 20 gigahertz to 40. That is a huge, huge range. To give you an idea, the professional level gigahertz solutions meters, and there are some excellent ones, the lowest frequency RF meter that they have in what I consider to be their professional range series, they don't call it that. I call it that. It's the HFE 59B. It has a 3.3 gigahertz range, and it starts as low as, I think it's 27 megahertz. So that's a smaller part of the spectrum, right? The range for that entire meter only spans 3.3 gigahertz, not 20 gigahertz. They have another product called the HFW 59D, and that spans 7.6 gigahertz. Up until recently, that was a huge range, and yet 7.6 is a small portion of the 20 gigahertz range of this new product. There is another product from Safe Living Technologies called the Safe and Sound Pro 2. I wonder if it's one of the most popular RF meters of all time. I don't know. I don't know what the sales figures are, but it's an excellent meter. It has a range of around 7, a little over 7 gigahertz. It goes from 400 megahertz to 7.21, I think it is, gigahertz. So what I'm sharing with you is frequency response ranges for different RF meters. This thing, part of the amazing breakthrough nature of it is it's 20 gigahertz in range. That's a huge part of the spectrum. And it's way up in frequency between 20 and 40. So very high frequencies and then very broad range of frequencies that it covers. The next question to consider is, what's the accuracy? So let me give you some context here. I mentioned 3 products: the gigahertz meter that measures up to 3.3 gigahertz, the gigahertz professional meter that measures up to 10 gigahertz, and the Safe and Sound Pro 2. I want to tell you what the accuracy of those is, and I'm going to tell you what the accuracy of this meter is. So the first one that I mentioned, the gigahertz HFE 59B with the 3.3 gigahertz range, it's plus or minus 3 dB. The other gigahertz is an HFW 59D. It's got a 7.6 gigahertz range from its lowest frequency to its highest, and it does that with 4.5 dB. The Safe and Sound Pro has a broad range going all the way from 400 megahertz to 7.2 gigahertz, and it does that with a level of accuracy of plus or minus 6 dB. This one, with a broader range, I wonder if I can say broader than all of them put together, like add them all together. But anyway, with that incredible 20 gigahertz range, way up at starting at 20 gigahertz itself, it has plus or minus 5 dB. So that's amazing. I do want to put a brief disclaimer in here and say, with all of those other meters that I mentioned, we have third-party testing and verification. Right now, what I've learned from my conversation, my interview with Rob Metzinger, is it's very difficult to find a facility, a third-party facility, capable of measuring the level of sensitivity I mentioned. And so they haven't been able to get yet a third-party confirmation of that plus or minus 5 dB. I know they're working on that. I hope they don't have to buy equipment for the third-party test company. The in-house testing that they've done has been according to ISO standards for testing methodology, and it's used equipment that has the requisite sensitivity. But I know Safe Living will feel better, and I know customers will feel better when they have that third-party certification of plus or minus 5 dB over that entire range of 20 to 40 gigahertz. That's in the works, and as I understand it, they should have it soon. All right, so after looking at the frequency response and after looking at the accuracy and after looking at the sensitivity, I would say the next thing that's really relevant here is ease of use. It is of no help to have something that's difficult to use or confusing to use, even if it has the requisite sensitivity, frequency response, and accuracy. So this meter is dead simple to use. I'm holding one in my hands right now. There's a button called power, and it also controls a speaker function. But, oh, by the way, this is an improvement over their last several products. They have, Safe Living has in the past used a slide switch which I think has been a real weakness of their previous products. I mean, don't get me wrong, I like their previous products, but if I were to pick the single worst thing about the design of the previous products, I think it would be the interface between, the user turning the product on and off. There's been an improvement in this product. It's now a push button, not a slide, which I think should give them increased reliability over time. Anyway, when you push and hold down the power button, you can see the device going through a self-check, and it shows you how much battery life you have left. Then when it's finished with that self-check and showing you the battery level, it goes to a screen that shows two options, and the two options have to do with the antenna selection. So this meter has replaceable, changeable antennas. Right now there are two the stub antenna and a horn antenna. So you just need to tell the meter which one you have. Do you have the stub antenna, which is sort of a semi-omnidirectional antenna, or do you have the horn antenna? And we'll talk about each of those in a little bit. You choose the one that you have, and then you press down the only other push button on this thing, and you'll be taken then into the functioning of the meter. So now I am looking at the actual measured intensity to the level of sensitivity that I mentioned earlier. So what are the levels of mmWave RF radiation in the range that we spoke about? So that's just simple to operate. You press the on-off button, tell it which antenna you have, and immediately you're getting readings. So I think that's the next most important feature of this product is its ease of use. Next up, I would say the battery life is impressive. In order to catch events, you have to have a lot more measurements per second, which costs battery life. And I am not the kind of guy to put a battery in and start a stopwatch and, tell you I got, 4.7 hours out of a Duracell battery or whatever. What I will tell you is, in my experience, battery life is not an issue. I've used a lot of different meters. It's just not an issue. I did like 3 days of testing on one battery. And what I mean by 3 days of testing, I'm not talking about 8 hours a day with the meter turned on. I'm talking about going to a location where I wanted to make some observations, powering the meter on, checking the levels, and powering the meter off. And I got, like I say, 3 days worth of testing with that methodology before I needed to replace the battery. I forgot exactly what the number of hours Rob mentioned in the interview I did with him. You can take a look at that interview. I think it was somewhere between 4 and 5 hours, but it's in the non-issue category for me. I should mention also that this, of course, has what I would call the max hold feature. So when you're observing the measured intensity of RF radiation in your area, you'll see one line of the meter display is dedicated to peak readings. So what is the current peak reading? The next line is the maximum. So what is the maximum reading that was taken? And the last is average. I, in my work, never use average. I don't care what the average is. It means nothing in terms of a physiological effect, for my opinion. The peak is mildly interesting. It's helpful in finding the direction or the proximity. I can see the current peak number going up or going down as I turn myself from side to side or move forward and backwards. The one I use the most is the maximum intensity exposure. And it will retain that maximum level intensity on that second line of the screen, so that as you're taking a measurement within a bedroom or wherever you are, you don't have to be writing down constantly, okay, I just saw this number, I just saw this number. You'll have the maximum number retained for you, and that number is not reset until you press the mode button, that second button that we use to select the antenna, which antenna you're using. When the meter is in active analysis mode, anytime you press the mode button, it also functions as the maximum reset. So, next I want to talk about the maximum signal. And you can damage sensitive RF analysis equipment by overpowering it, by exposing it to a signal of too great an intensity. This meter has protection built in so that if you get into an environment where the intensity of the RF radiation exposure is too great, it will shut itself off. It won't allow itself to be damaged, which is a great feature. But I want to talk about what the maximum signal levels are that you can measure with this meter. And it varies just as the level of sensitivity varied between the stub antenna. Your sensitivity was 5 microwatts per square meter, and the horn was 0.5. There's a difference between the stub and the horn antennas with regard to maximum signal. So with the stub antenna, you can measure a much greater intensity of RF radiation, 500,000 microwatts per square meter. With the horn, you can only measure 30,000 microwatts per square meter. This is of absolutely no concern to me, because if you're talking about intensities this high, you shouldn't even be there, in my opinion. But some people, maybe in different areas anyway, they may want to write down numbers that are higher. So Safe Living does have what's called an attenuator that you can install with the antenna, and it will allow you to do 100 times more than the numbers I just quoted. So with the stub antenna and the attenuator, instead of only doing 500,000 microwatts, you can go to 50 million microwatts with the attenuator. And with the horn antenna, instead of being limited to 30,000 microwatts per square meter, you can do 100 times more than that, which is 3 million with the attenuator. So those are the maximum signal capabilities of this meter. A notable is that this, like the Safe and Sound Pro 2 meter, has an audio analysis feature. We're all now beginning to recognize certain sounds, make a certain analysis from the audio output of this meter. There is a request I would have. I think the maximum volume of the speaker, the internal speaker, should be louder. And from what I understand, that's just a bit of programming. There are 3 levels of, sound output, but I find even the highest level of sound output is a little lower than I would care for. I have used this with headphones. I've used this meter with headphones. It works very well with the current output levels. And I've hooked it up to some audio and video equipment on the output, and that's been an interesting experience as well. All right, so let's take a look at pricing. So this meter is not an inexpensive meter, as you might imagine, being breakthrough in so many areas. The base product is $849, and that is with the stub antenna only. Now I want to mention briefly some of the differences between the stub antenna and the horn antenna. With the stub antenna, it's what's called a quasi-omnidirectional. It's trying to be every direction, and it's not omnidirectional. So just like other meters, as you are measuring a signal, you need to manipulate this meter in sort of a figure 8 pattern in front of you. In the air, you're sort of tracing a figure 8 pattern while you're taking the reading, and that is so that you can expose the stub antenna to left of center, right of center, up, down, all the different areas, and you're getting full exposure to that stub antenna. Technically, the stub antenna has a 50-degree front and 50-degree back window instead of 180 degrees in the front and 180 degrees in the back. Now, the horn option is $1,149. And that comes with the stub antenna and the horn. And the horn is a 35-degree, so it's just a slice of the space in front of the meter, nothing behind the meter. So this is really helpful when you want to reduce or increase the sensitivity to lower the reading that you can take, the 0.5 microwatts per square meter. If you want that level of accuracy, you need to have the horn antenna to do that. The drawback, which also can be a benefit, is you have to be pointing right at the source of the radiation. This could be useful in an urban setting where you have more than one source of millimeter wave radiation, and you're really trying to get, for example, what is coming out of that, stationary apparatus, whether it's cell phone related or anything else. You just point the horn directly at the offending radiator, if you will, and you'll be able to measure accurately. So $849 with the stub only, $1,149 with the stub and the horn. And if you want those higher level of intensity exposure, you'll need the attenuator. And it allows you, in both cases, with the horn and with the stub, to measure levels of radio frequency radiation intensity that are 100 times higher than can be measured without the attenuator. You need to then take a look at what's being measured on the meter, and then you need to add 2 zeros when you're using the attenuator. So if your attenuator says you are at 1,000, You need to add 2 zeros and know that it's 100,000. So I hope that's clear. The price for the attenuator seems kind of steep to me, given what's involved. It is $250 for the attenuator. And that's really it. So I want to make some closing remarks here. Again, what's really unique is the sensitivity and the accuracy. This form factor, it being battery powered, something that you can carry with you. It's all very unique, very easy to use. Battery life is more than adequate. Max signal for me is not going to be any problem. I mean, like I said, I don't want to be in a place that's more than 30,000 microwatts per square meter. But if I need to measure higher than that, I know I can get the attenuator for that. It's great that it has the audio analysis. Safe Living has a track record of bringing to market products that are what they say they are. And so they're not the cheapest products out there, but they are of a level of quality and a level of performance that you can do real work with them. So I feel confident that my money was well spent and that they are going to follow through and get the third-party certification of their accuracy results. And I've had interactions with Safe Living with regard to questions afterwards that I might have on a product, or if something wasn't quite right, and they've always been very, very responsive. That's never been an issue. So great product. And I guess another comment I should make here is mmWave radiation. We've all been led to believe, I think, that this was associated primarily with the new 5G telephony, the sort of 5G smartphones and higher data rates, which means faster downloads. And that's what mmWave RF exposure was all about. And there's been a tremendous pushback, of course, with 5G and people expressing concern about mmWave radiation exposure. This is really the first time that we have had the ability to really check and see what is going on at this 20 to 40 gigahertz range. It's the first time that we've been able to do this. And the news is not good. And you can check out my other videos, my other podcasts on this. But mmWave RF radiation has already been deployed in certain key areas. So even if you're in a place that hopefully will never have the 5G mmWave RF radiation exposures required for what's called a 5G high band, you may live, like I do, in a place where it would be very inconvenient for the industry to implement that. But unfortunately, they've been busy sort of filling a lot of spaces that have no need for mmWave radiation with mmWave radiation. So there's more need for this meter in more places by more people than I would have initially imagined. This is not the first meter. If you're interested in this whole topic of understanding what types of EMF you're being exposed to, there's a whole world. There's a low-end, low-frequency radiation associated with the power lines. There's also much lower frequency deployments associated with a lot of the communication infrastructure for public safety, amateur radio communications, AM radio, FM radio. All of these are below most of the RF meters, and then you start getting into the RF, the radio frequency meters, and as I mentioned before, there's quite a lot there. You've got radar and you've got ISM bands, which have things like weather stations and whatnot, and you have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and cell phones and whatnot. All of that is going to be covered by different meters. If you're really new to this and you think you might be able to buy one meter to do everything I just mentioned, it doesn't exist. You'll need a meter dedicated to low frequency, maybe 2 meters dedicated to low frequency, electric and magnetic, depending. And you'll need something to cover what was before what we thought was the whole universe of RF deployment below 8 gigahertz or 10 gigahertz. And then this, way up at 20 to 40, is the first look that we've had in this part of the spectrum. So if 5G is your primary concern and you're really worried about millimeter wave exposure and you have no other meters, sure, go ahead and get this. But know that there's an entire universe of things out there. And I think, this is an editorial comment, but I think all the focus on 5G might somehow have the effect of getting people to think that all the other unnatural, all the other non-native EMF that we're being exposed to are okay. It's just that the 5G is bad. And I would say, my opinion, nothing could be further from the truth. So this isn't the entire, the meter that exposes the entire gamut of non-native EMF. It is a hugely important piece. So I hope this has been helpful. This has been Keith Cutter with EMFRemedy.com. Look forward to seeing you next time.